Welcome to the Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Scott Clark.
And I'm Dave Dale. This episode is all about immigration and international students, a big topic across the country and in North Bay.
I had a chance, I bumped into George Burton with the change of appointment for the Honorary Colonel program at the 22 Wing.
President of Canadore,
Yeah, President of Canadore, who took a ton of heat. When was it? Was it in the? Yeah, I guess it was in the fall, right?
Yep.
When all the international students came, then there was this big protest at the campus, and there was people camping outside, and you know there was no homes for anybody, and it was like it was a show, right? It was big, and it was in everybody was covering it, and I think through that process, Canadore and George Burton specifically was vilified through it, right? It's like, how do you get all these people here and you don't have any housing for them? Really interesting. And that was in my head. I'm like, what's going on? They're camping out front? And I had heard, different stories about, people just literally knocking on doors down the street saying, do you have a room? So I was like, how does something like this happen? But it was really interesting. We have coming up today, Don Curry's in, and it was great education for me when he said like that was a bunch of bunk, by some group in, I don't know if it was Montreal or Toronto, that came up to create this stir. Absolutely housing is an issue, but it was really this group that came up, and there was no one camping. There was no one in tents, right? I think someone, I don't know if it was Clark or someone that actually shot inside one of the tents. It was just an empty tent, right? They were just making a point. So it was really interesting because I thought Canada dropped the ball. I thought they didn't get in front of the story. They wouldn't comment to any of the media. And then eventually George put some sort of statement out to the college community about, here's where it's at. There's some bad actors involved. This is what we've been doing, because they actually did quite a bit, right? They housed students for a while to get them on their feet, to get going. So I'm saying all this to ask you the question, is there a problem with the international students and how many came? And because now the federal government's saying, look, you're going to have half those numbers this year.
I think there was legitimately some issues with a number of students not prepared to and knowing what the accommodation situation was here. When I was a student, when I came, they just gave me a list. Go find your place to live. It's none of our business, right? But we'll try to help you. And because the market's so tight, some people were caught, like Upar in our previous interview. He said there were people that didn't have options, and it's pretty tight. They're more expensive than they thought. Not necessarily Canadore's fault. And possibly, as Upar said, some of them didn't get good advice and a good understanding where they're coming. Now, as for Canadore and George Burton and whatnot, there is an underlying thing. It was building up for the last couple of years that they were really capitalizing big time on international students. Like I went into their financials and I looked online here, and $121 million of their revenue in 2020 and 21 was
Canadore 100.
Yes.
Canadore? That's the kind of money they were. Come on.
Yes. And only $13 million in domestic students.
Stop it.
No, really, it's lopsided, right?
That's massive difference.
Yeah, and at that time, it was half Chinese, half India, very, very concentrated.
Yeah, he did, from my understanding, like a number of years ago, because I had talked to him. I remember him going to China quite often to build the aviation program. There was a lot of Chinese students that were coming, international students from China. So he was creating that pipeline, and building the relationships with China. So really interesting. So
everybody knows it's like a big part of the budget up there, a big part of the revenue, and Canadore is getting as much as they possibly can, right? Why wouldn't you? Although it grows into a situation, and when that pimple is kind of popped like last September, whether it's their fault or not, it looked like they were taking advantage of the international students.
It felt like that, right?
Yeah.
There was actually, as the way the story was told, it felt like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I feel like that now, right? So yes, but here's the other thing. I believe, because I've sat on a board of governors for a university and a college, the way the system is designed is, provincial and federal governments are not funding universities and colleges based on students and programming and that. It's based on numbers and revenue. And so you can get another building built if you have more students and more revenue. What's interesting, so they're not providing funding for students and things like that. They're providing it for buildings. But what was interesting at the time when I was sitting on a board, it was like, well, those numbers are shrinking in Ontario. They didn't have the international pipeline of students. So they're shrinking. So the model isn't working. So you're going to give us money for a new building. We can't actually fill the building we're in right now. Like, really interesting. I'm going, this is broken. So then, they were smart enough to figure out, it's like, wait a second, we have this pipeline of potential students that would like to come from a distance, international students, and it's going to help us with that pipeline, going to help us with student numbers, help us with revenue as well, because they're going to come in and they're going to be paying a whole lot more than the students here in the province. And it's like, okay, this is like a bit of a win-win. What's really, I find fascinating now is now, like, this has happened. It's completely integrated. We have an intern student that we pay and is doing a great job for us here. And if you go out into the city now, so many jobs are filled by these international students. So by cutting this thing in half now, I think there many retailers and different service groups and businesses in the area are going to feel, again, the people on Main Street are going to feel the pinch. Mm-hmm. That's who's going to really feel the pinch. And actually, George Burton posted about that on LinkedIn. He had a whole thing where he posted, he says, you know what, if the government doesn't, federal government doesn't come around with this, because I think Vic Fideli's, stood up and said, look, the feds have gone too far with what they're doing on a cap. It's going to affect the revenue and the growth of these different institutions.
Canadore is in a position where it's going to be impacted greatly. And the posts from George Burton on LinkedIn show how nervous he is, both for being able to operate, but fulfill what he feels is the college's mandate to prepare workers for the economy.
Right.
As well as being a very big driver of the North Bay community economy. That's the problem with this model, when you have the feds tinkering, pushing it one year and then cutting it in half another. Like, I don't very often feel sorry for George Burton.
Well, I don't think George Burton feels sorry for you either, David.
Well, I think we agree on each other's opinions of each other.
Nice.
I don't know.
I can't wait to get him in here one time.
I'd love to sit down and talk to the guy.
Would you be nice to him if you came in?
I would ask him some harder questions.
What would be one hard question you would ask him?
I would ask him if some of the deals he made with international student agencies from India were suspect. It's like there was a big crackdown on that stuff, and a lot of things changed. And did he ever get involved with an agency that was treated with not kind gloves by the province?
But I would say, let me answer for George.
So I just want to
let me answer for George on that one.
Okay,
Do you think? Well, no, hang on. Let me ask you a question. Do you think George would knowingly work with suspect companies to drive students to North Bay? I don't think he would. That's what I think. I don't think he would be like, okay, that's a shady company. We're going to get behind them.
I think, like most of the people that are running corporations, is that they look beyond that type of thing and just look at the numbers and the results and aren't really concerned with the impacts, possibly forgetting about the impacts to the students that are lured here. Yes, that's what I think. Okay. Yeah. But I would ask him to explain it.
No, it would be interesting, because I'm sure it's taken into account, like we do have in the city a huge problem with housing, right? It's not a secret. We're trying to figure it out. The Ford government's trying to figure it out. Everybody's trying to figure this out, right? And And even Renzo Severi's trying to figure it out. Are we talking about Premier Road?
Yeah, well, I don't know if we're going to have any time, but
yeah, we'll have time for that.
Yeah.
In the next episode?
And the next one.
Next one? Okay, we'll talk about it.
It's coming back to council, so.
Oh, is it? Okay, good. But I think that nobody saw what was about to happen. And I think, like, when I went, like, it was interesting. Like, I've read some of the comments. People are like, well, I went to college and we all went, well, I shouldn't say we all went, but many of us went to post-secondary and we had to find our way. We had to find a place, and sometimes you surfed a couch or two until you got your place, and then you kept going, and then you figured it out. It's all part of the growing up thing, right? Why did it become such a crisis? Why is it so different today than when you and I were going to college and university? Was there way more housing back then? Did we have way more opportunities? Because in some of these comments, it's like, well, I went and I've had to figure out my way. Why don't these students?
I think there's been a culture shift on what people accept as proper and okay. And, I know that when I was going to college in North Bay, there was a lot of crappy accommodations that you had to weed through, and people were getting away with a lot with little cubby holes as rooms. So
could you? Yeah, when we went like the crap that we did. I remember the place I had when I was in college, my first year. It was like when our girlfriends were coming for the weekend. Like there was a few of us in the house. We'd have to go around and set mouse traps up because you could hear the mice like in the walls and everything like that, all running around. It's like, okay, this isn't going to fly if the girlfriends show up for the weekend, right?
Need a culling.
Yeah, and you need to do a bit of a culling. So we do a bit of a culling, and then we'd always forget a mousetrap or two, right? And all of a sudden you would hear something at different times. You hear whack, and you're like, "What's that noise?" Nothing. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Oh, well, we had to get rid of the rodents.
So now let's hear what Don Curry has to say about immigration, because he is a consultant and he has very good insight on it.
Good guy.
We have today a special guest who's an immigration consultant, Don Curry. Thank you for coming.
Great to be here, Dave. Thank you. And nice to see Scott beside me.
Nicer to see you, Don. It's great. Don, let me ask you first question. Is it just me, or is visually with immigration North Bay changing?
Oh, big time. Yeah. Yeah, I use the phrase, the changing face of North Bay. And we've really seen it the last 2-3 years, especially. Like I first started using that phrase about 10 years ago, and there wasn't much of a difference on the streets. Now, wherever you go, you can see the difference.
I went to this labor market group conference it was in Timmins, and you were speaking at it. So this was a few years
ago.
It was a few years ago.
Okay.
But you said you watch as immigration has changed, and especially in Northern Ontario, some of the businesses that you've seen and been part of and are all changing hands to new Canadians that are coming in. Or often new Canadians. And you said it back then. You said, watch, it's gonna happen quickly. And you're right. There has been, when was the last time Northern Ontario saw such an influx of immigrants to our areas?
Oh, you're probably going back to, the Italians, a generation ago, but before that, when all the mines opened in Timmins and Kirkland Lake and Elliott Lake and Sudbury, people were coming mainly at that time from Eastern Europe, and so that was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. So we haven't seen a big influx, I would say, since the Italians back to turn of the last century.
That's how old we are now.
Yeah.
Last century.
Well, we had a big influx after the Second World War, which is where we got Mr. Hunka.
The Ukrainian gentleman, yes. Yeah.
Right? So there's been a couple different waves of immigration into North Bay. I think twice with the Italians, and then the first, of course, were the Irish to come in and take the railway land.
Yeah, you're going way back. Yeah.
Right? So it's all been immigrants.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we're a nation of immigrants. So, no matter where you are in Canada, it's immigrants that founded the place. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long have you been an immigration consultant?
Just over 4 years now. So when I retired from the Multicultural Center at 2015, I think it was. Yeah, the end of 2015, I started playing a lot of golf, read a lot of books, and after a couple of years of that, I got bored and decided to go back to school, took immigration consulting courses, which are mandatory to become an immigration consultant through University of British Columbia Law School. And we had to write a 3-hour exam at the end of that and became an immigration consultant and been going steady ever since.
You were pretty close to 70 at that time.
I was.
Were you the oldest in your class?
Well, it was all virtual, so I expect I was. I didn't see them all.
How many clients, and what do you do for them?
Clients, the first year was slow, but this year has been unbelievable. I've got way more than last year. So I just signed up this morning, client number 325.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot. Over 4 years, almost 4 years exactly. So the first year I had one client, I think, because I started in November, and by the end of the year I had one client. The next year was maybe about 30 or 40, and then it just started to steamroll as people realized I was doing this.
Why would they hire you? I'm not exactly sure what you do.
Okay, all sorts of things. Study permits, which I'm trying to get out of, because most students who come to Canadore and Nipissing already have their study permit. They've got it from overseas. Study permit extensions when they graduate from Canadore and Nipissing, work permits, and then when they decide they want to become a permanent resident application, and when they decide they want to become a Canadian citizen 3 years later, Canadian citizenship.
So I'm just assuming that all of this paperwork anybody could do, but it's way easier if you have someone who has experience doing the paperwork.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a story. I've had 2 PhDs, one from North Bay who's now living in Montreal, and another lady from Montreal, PhDs. And they got through. They tried to do the paperwork, and they just threw up their hands and
Come
said,
on.
"Can't do it."
Yeah, they're PhDs.
PhDs, yeah. English is their first language.
Really?
Yeah.
That's incredible to understand.
But a lot of people do it themselves. If you got a lot of patience and you really want to bug the government, okay, what does this question mean? And if you can actually get anybody from the government on the phone to answer your question, good luck to you. So it's difficult. So, after you've seen a lot of applications, it gets easier and easier. So,
yeah, of course.
So the first year I was pretty slow at it, but now I'm pretty quick. Yeah.
So they pay for the experience and the frustration and avoid that frustration.
That's right. And then especially with PR applications, once their application is submitted to the government, all the communication between the government and the client goes through me. So they're not answering the phone. Well, you never answer the phone. It's all by email. So I take all those questions, talk to the client. Okay, they want to know this, they want to know that, they want this document, they want that document. So it takes the pressure off the client, who mainly their English is not their first language. So they're not crazy about dealing with government, and some of them are fearful of government in the first place. So it just makes it a whole lot easier for them, and they feel more confident in the process.
So you were watching very closely this fall when there was a big problem with the students not having accommodation. There was some protests, and you had some insight about that. How would you describe what happened this fall and going forward?
I'd say a lot of good photo ops there. Yeah, there was some agitators came in from Montreal, and they wanted to stir things up, and they did. They got some media play out of it. But I think the issue was way overblown. There likely were a few students who had trouble getting accommodation, but these were adults. You don't move to a city without arranging accommodation ahead of time. So the whole thing was really fishy to me. And a couple of my clients told me, these people, yes, we all have rooms. We all got rooms before we got here. This organizer from Montreal was trying to stir things up, and what his objective was, I don't know.
Well, they did come into a pretty hot market, and you watched
did.
our podcast interview with Upar, who described that there was not a lot of options. It's a pretty tight market and pretty high prices for some, though.
Yeah. Well, my clients, they're living, the single ones, living 6 to 7 to a house, that sort of thing. So they find a way. The married couples, some of them are 2 and 3 couples to a house. But they're finding them. Like with I told you 325 clients, nobody has told me that they haven't found a place to stay. Nobody. So like I'm seeing clients every day. So it's not the issue that it was made out to be. With I'm sure there were a few that but they came in late. Obviously, maybe they decided at the last minute they're going to go to school in North Bay. My suspicion is that they were from out of town, down south, Mississauga, Toronto, Brampton area. Found out about the RNIP program, the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot. Say, hey, that's the fast track to permanent residence. I'm going to go to Canadore College, and it's a last minute decision. So they got here, and where am I going to stay?
Some of that too.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of planning ahead of it.
That's interesting. And so we don't know what the motivation was for the group that really was spearheading this with the media.
Well, from what I read in the media, the organizer, this guy from Montreal, was saying they wanted their tuition money back and they wanted to be able to do it online from down south, which I think Canadore allowed them to do that. Oh. So they didn't stay here at all anyway.
Oh, but then do they get the benefits of the RNIP program?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
That part they didn't figure out.
Okay.
You have to live here.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Really interesting, because it was interesting that George Burton wasn't coming out and talking about it.
Yeah, it was.
And,
yeah. It should have been a little quicker.
Yeah, it was like, it's really interesting. But I think he was the first that I read when he came out to speak about it, was about that these are a nefarious group that's overblowing this. And it's like, okay,
It was a leverage play, right?
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Gain some media attention to use as leverage.
Yeah, sounds like it to me.
Never heard of that happening before, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and what to realize, like Scott said, with the RNIP program, if you take a 2-year program at Canadore College, you have to be here for 18 months of those 2 years.
So tell us about the RNIP program. What does it stand for?
Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot.
Okay.
Fantastic program, and that's why I'm so busy.
Yeah.
Because the word is out among international students that the Express Entry program is very difficult to get your permanent residence through that, because it's all points-based. The older you are, the fewer points you get. The more education you have, the more points you get. The better your English language, the more points you get. But you're competing against hundreds of thousands of people, and there's only draws, every few weeks. So with RNIP, you're competing against hundreds of people, not hundreds of thousands.
Okay.
So the word is out. Mainly, what I'm seeing is people who come here lived in a smaller city in India or Philippines or wherever they came from, and they would rather be in a small city. They don't want to live in Toronto. But an awful lot of immigrants do. Like we call it TMV, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. That's where they gravitate towards. But we're getting people who came from a small city and want to be in a small city, and it's working out really well for them. So it's a 2-step process. First, they have to go through the North Bay RNIP committee. There's 2 coordinators, one at Yes Employment, one at the chamber office. They have to do a few things online, fill out a work form, offer of employment form, put their client profile online with the North Bay site, their English language test results. And if all that lines up, they get an email from one of the RNIP coordinators, usually Heather Van Veen at Yes Employment. And she sends them a questionnaire all about living in North Bay. How long you been here? Have you made friends? What are you doing? That kind of stuff. And if she's happy with the answers, she takes her file to her committee, which is the chamber, the city, economic department, economic development, labor market group, and multicultural center, Yes Employment, and the chamber. End of every month, they have a meeting, and they go through and award community recommendations. So once they have that community recommendation, then the fun begins. They actually apply for permanent residence. So they have to get that community recommendation before they can even apply.
Wow. That's quite the process.
Yeah. So the North Bay process takes a month or two, depending on what kind of job they have. I know Heather's been holding back fast food jobs lately because she got a bunch of them at the start. She says, I don't want to be swamped with fast food jobs. I want to get all the other skill levels. So if they're a high skill level, they'll go through it in a month, 2 months maximum. And then they get the community recommendation. Then it takes us 2-3 weeks to get their PR application ready and submitted. And then they're looking at about a 6-month wait before they get their permanent residence.
We're taking a break from the Don Curry interview to talk about this. The North Bay Home and Garden Expo at Memorial Gardens, February 23rd to 25th.
What's new this year different than other years?
This year's probably, we have over 100 vendors that are going to be involved this year, from recliners to hot tubs to siding to roofing, stylists and everything else in between, including solar experts. But this year we're welcoming Harriet Madigan, Clean Green Beautiful, and the Resilience Fair that talks about climate change, your footprint, your climate footprint, and things that you could be doing in your home. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
And I heard there's a bunch of North Bay Echo hosts of podcasts that are going to be interviewing some of those resilience workshop leaders.
That's right. So you'll see Bill from Backroads Bill will be there. Lisa will be there from To North Bay with Love, all doing their shows. So that'll be fun to see.
And Dave Dale from Small Town Times.
What?
Yeah,
Dave Dale
he's
from
gonna
Small
sneak
Town
in there.
Times with his fancy new haircut will be there too.
No, with his hat.
So join us, Memorial Gardens, February 23rd to 25th. All the door proceeds go to the North Bay Food Bank. Only $2, or bring a non-perishable food item. Look forward to seeing you there.
You have a lot of experience. You're a journalist and editor for 10 years, and you're a teacher of journalism for 10 years, and then you help create all these other programs, Multicultural Center. How are we keeping up with the current events in the world right now regarding immigration? Like I think, Scott, we were talking earlier about what position is Canada in going forward, right?
Well, I was just reading an article about, some of the transformation that's happening with immigration. So there's sort of two things that I wanted to ask is that in Europe and I'll say the United States, I'm not clear on Canada, but there seems to be this drumbeat to stop immigration, right? And it seems to be resonating with a lot of people, even though there's a tremendous need to fill, skilled labor and positions. And what's interesting is Australia and Great Britain are going through this comprehensive change on immigration right now, and Canada's taking a very different approach. And I just wanted to hear sort of your thought on this drumbeat that's happening, how, everybody seems to be struggling with immigration, and part of the people don't want immigration, but we know we need immigration. My parents immigrated here,
Yeah. Well, Canada's been a nation of immigrants forever, and support for immigration in Canada has always been high. But you're right, it's been dropping lately. Just because the world news, people are looking at the U.S.-Mexican border and all the fun they're having there. Remember the Quebec problem where refugees were coming into Quebec. That has stopped since then. So both those things got a lot of press. The housing, I don't know if we call it a crisis, but it's certainly a concern, is getting a lot of news. And some people are blaming immigrants for that. I think that they're a very, very small percentage of the issue. But attitudes are changing a little bit. People are not as exuberant about immigration as they have been, but still a majority of Canadians favor immigration. They know we need it. folks like me, baby boomers, most of the baby boomers retire. I didn't retire, but most of them do. So they're out of the workforce. So it used to be, I don't know what the number was when I was working, maybe 7 people working for every retired person. It's a lot less than that now. I'm not sure what the number is, but we need people working, paying taxes to support our healthcare system and everything else that we need in the country. So I think most Canadians see that.
Is the myth, or is it a myth, that some people feel that with immigration that it's taking jobs away from people that live here? Is that true? Myth?
No. It's actually the opposite. Immigrants create jobs. Like you were talking earlier about number of immigrants starting businesses.
Yeah.
And these businesses employ people. The last time, when I was at the Multicultural Center, I think about 2014, 2015, we just did a staff brainstorming session. Let's count the number of immigrant-owned businesses in North Bay proper, not outlying. And we came up with well over 100. I think it was about 110, 111. That was a few years ago. And I've seen a lot more come in since then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're employing people. They're paying taxes. They're working hard.
So who creates this myth then?
Yeah, well, people who don't know any better, people who don't interact with immigrants maybe on a regular basis and see just how smart and how hardworking they are. Like it's incredible the people I'm dealing with, that their education, their skill with the English language, most of them, not all of them, hardworking. While they're going to school, they're driving for Skip the Dishes or whatever. They're working at McDonald's or A&W or whatever.
We have an intern here, Upar, who's been on Dave's show, and he's unbelievable. And one of the reasons he got the job was like old school, right? He, dropped off his resume. He asked to speak with me, and then I wasn't available. Then a couple of days later, he came back. I wasn't available, and then he'd come back again. And, and then I was available, right? That's like old school, right? Knock on the door and come in. Like I try and preach that to my son too. You just got to show up, knock on the door, ready to work.
Exactly.
And it was like, we found a place for people that are eager, hungry to work, eager to learn, right?
Yeah. One of my sons is a manager of a mental health and addictions large organization in Brockville. And they started a drop-in center for homeless people on the weekends because they had it during the week, but they had nowhere to go on the weekends, just last weekend. And he couldn't get anybody to staff it. He was paying $24 an hour.
And couldn't get anybody to staff it?
Nobody applied, went through all.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. I said, I was talking to him. I said, try the school. The St. Lawrence College there. They got a mental health and addictions program. Talk to the international students.
They'll be
he
lined up.
He hired 3 international students that afternoon. He said, they're fantastic. He said, the best interviews I've ever seen.
So if all of this is true, right, then why is Great Britain and I'll say Australia going through this massive reform when it comes to immigration, where really they're kind of they're talking about shutting borders.
Yeah. Well, Britain's an island, and you can get there by a little boat from France.
Or the Channel.
Or the Channel, yeah. Canada's a little harder to get into.
Yeah.
We got oceans on 3 sides, so it's the American border. So it's not as severe a problem for us. And it's not in the news as much. But the last 2 immigration ministers, Sean Fraser, previous one, and now Mark Miller, they're changing immigration rapidly. Like there's new programs coming every day. It seems like it's just hard to keep up with them. So they're doing some things to slow it down a little bit. They're still keeping the permanent resident numbers at about roughly $500,000 people per year for the next couple of years. But people were concerned about the number of international students, the number of temporary foreign workers. So they doubled the amount that international students have to have in the bank before they come here. It used to be about roughly $10,000. They had to have a GIC to prove it. So they doubled that to a little over 20,000. So that's going to cut back the number of international students for next fall.
It's interesting. I'll use my parents' journey when they came here, and you hear this, like especially from baby boomers, and I still have the trunk that they came across in because they painted on there like where they were going and everything. But the story is this, right? They had a sponsor. They had $25 in their pocket. They came across here. They got a job when they got here. They lived in someone's basement, right? What I understand, that couldn't happen today. You can't arrive here with $25 in your pocket. You got to have 20 grand. Like,
That's right.
You got to have you have
right.
to have a wallet full of money before you even get here. Plus, I'm assuming you have to have some sort of trade, or it's very different from when our parents came.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, and here's a myth. This is around the Christmas dinner table or Thanksgiving dinner, when we start talking about immigration or something, and they'll say that, well, they get everything when they come over here. And I said, well, wouldn't it have been great when mom and dad came here that they could have been provided more benefits to get a leg up and get started? Nope.
Yeah.
So you wanted it harder for our parents
Yeah,
when they already
exactly.
went through a hard time. So there's this, I think that's a myth, right?
Big time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I get somebody who emails me anonymously all the time. And says, oh yeah, what you're doing about immigration. When my parents came, just exactly what you just said. They had nobody helping them. They didn't have a settlement organization like the Multicultural Center.
Wouldn't it have been great?
They didn't have English classes.
Yeah.
Well, the old times weren't as good as you think they were.
Yeah, I bet. I bet you. My parents have passed now, but they would have been like, it would have been great to have a little more help, right?
Exactly.
So, but to squash that myth, immigrants that come over aren't getting everything for free when they arrive here.
They're
Right?
getting nothing for free. Well, there's different classes of immigrants. Refugees, yes. But that's a very small number out of the total. The ones who are coming in economic classes as permanent residents, which is the vast majority, they have to have proof that they can support themselves for the first 6 months or so, and have a job when they get here so they can support their family. Money in the bank. They have to have education. There's no free pass for them. Family class, where, say, a Canadian marries somebody from the Philippines, a little bit of a different story. The Canadian has to show that he has the funds to support that spouse for the first 3 years that she's here. Mm-hmm. So it's still, it's not the immigrant that has to have the money; it's the sponsor.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but economic immigrants are the vast majority, and they got money in their pocket when they get here.
Interesting. That's really interesting. What could we be doing better, Don, as a community? Because you've done a lot. You've helped launch the Multicultural Center here, but not just here, but also in Timmins as well. What could we be doing better as a community to, I'll say help the bottom line, but really assimilating people or not assimilating people? I'm not sure.
Well, I think one thing there has to be more awareness of what immigration is doing to North Bay right now, and it's positive. Once we figure out some answers for the housing and everything, that's an issue right now. But they're creating jobs, they're getting jobs. I'm dealing with immigrants who are dentists, who are accountants, and I got a lawyer last week. They're bringing in skills that are really needed. But I find nobody's talking about it. We're talking about it today, which is great. But, city council meeting, do they ever talk about immigration? I've never heard a word about it. Never.
That's fascinating.
Never, ever.
No, Dave?
No, very rare.
Because you
But
follow
they might
council.
in the next time they do the transit update, because the buses are full.
They're full, and look who's on them.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're
I
right.
noticed that.
I
And
see people at the bus stop going, there's people at the bus stop.
Yeah.
And they're paying to ride our buses now.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like I live close to a bus stop, and there used to be nobody standing there. Now there's people
there's
lined
people
up.
at the bus stop. Yeah. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And people think it's a free ride for students and whatnot, but it's not
No, they
really,
pay for
because
it.
there's an agreement for bus passes. When they do the reduction in number of student immigrants, I wonder what the impact's going to be for Canadore, because I was looking at a sheet of the post-secondary institutions in Ontario. They're number 20th in how many immigrant students they have, or international students, with 3,500.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, they're not all in North Bay. Some of them are at their satellite campuses down south.
Right.
But a really good chunk of them are here in North Bay.
I heard something like 2,000, but I'm not sure.
I think that's probably pretty close.
That's a huge number.
And
it is a
a
huge
really
number.
big part of their budget. I heard up towards, like, as far as revenues go from students, I heard something like 80%. Is that true, do you think?
I haven't. I'm not privy to Canadore's budget, but I can tell you that a number of years ago, when George Burton first arrived back in the city, he used to be when I was at Canadore. George and I worked together, but he left, came back. At that time, Canadore was in really rough financial shape, very rough, and I think subsequent to that, the provincial government put a cap on tuition rates for domestic students, froze them, and they're still frozen. This was a number of years ago. So George and his team said, hey, we have to find a revenue stream. And the answer, which they figured out, and just about every other college in Ontario figured out, was international students. And they actively went out and recruited. So talked to George, haven't talked to him for a few months, but the last I spoke with him, he was talking about diversifying. And this was before we had the troubles with India, that was in the news.
Right.
Recalled or they kicked some of our diplomats out of India, et cetera.
Yeah, I read that in your Bay Today column.
Yeah, there you go.
And that made it to the Echo newsletter.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that for sure.
Which led to this interview.
That's right.
Cool.
Yeah. But so when I spoke to him, it would have been, I don't know, 3-4 months ago. And he was talking then. I said, George, you got a lot of students from India here. Like, it's sort of number one. He said, yeah. He says, I said, that could be dangerous, if anything happens. And he says, yeah, totally agree. He says, that's why we're trying to diversify. We're trying to get more students from Central America, South America, Africa.
I know George invested quite a bit, or Canadore invested quite a bit in the relationship with China and aviation.
Right.
Is that still, like, it's really interesting they mention that, because politically, we've been at odds with China in recent years, right? And, most recently with India, that could affect all of that, right?
Oh, yeah. Because, the whole issue of, the government relations sort of going down the toilet between India and Canada is going to have some effect back home, because, it'll be in the news in India. So, parents of students will say, hey, do you really want to go to Canada? Try Australia or Britain or somewhere else. So there'll be some effect. Who knows how large it will be. I think doubling the amount of money that they have to have it's going to be a larger effect than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to have, I don't know, my kids don't have 20 grand in their pocket. So
I got one, might be one of the last questions. I know another one of your son writes for the Globe, Bill Curry.
Yep.
And he's got his thumb on the pulse of pretty well everything that's going on politically. Going forward with the Conservative government high in the polls, Trudeau government slipping their policies on immigration. How do you see things shaping up in the next 6 months to a year politically as far as immigration goes?
I don't foresee any big changes. All the major parties, Liberal, Conservative, NDP, are all on the same page as far as immigration goes. So it's not an issue. The only ones against it are the People's Party, and they're at 1% in the polls, haven't elected anybody
So even the
yet.
Conservatives today?
Even the Conservatives today.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's refugees they don't like.
Yeah. People get confused. That's a good point, because the refugees are, like there are tens of thousands, whereas immigrants are 500,000.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's really important that you make that
Yeah.
that we make that clear, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes we don't, because you watch the news, they just bundle everything together,
Yeah,
right?
and refugees make the news. They are people who come here with nothing. They don't have $20,000 in their pocket. That's for sure. And we've got a lot of supports in place in the big cities, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, to help refugees.
And not enough as far as the cities are concerned.
No, exactly. Yeah, like Toronto's been screaming. They need a lot more. Yeah.
You've cleared up a lot of things today for us. Thanks. One last thing you'd like to talk about as far as the immigration situation?
No, I think the attitudes that I see and when people I talk to in North Bay are positive. I think I haven't heard a lot of negative talk about our changing face, which makes me feel good. I just wish there was more awareness among the general public about, just what we talked about today, like the difference between a refugee and an economic immigrant and a family class immigrant, a student and a temporary foreign worker. Like there's a lot of different categories of immigrants, which people don't get all the nuances. Yeah.
Don, really appreciate the work you do. I love, watching. I guess I'm of a certain age now that I can see it. I can actually watch the transformation of our community and our communities around Northern Ontario. Just like you said a number of years ago, this is happening, and let's buckle up and get excited about it, right? And as we brought on, one or two interns, we're super excited. We want to make sure that this platform also provides a voice to our immigrant community and to all of the community, right? So everybody has a voice. Great.
Well, I really appreciate both of you doing this today because I think getting the word out, educating the public it just hasn't been done. The more awareness we get about the benefits of immigration, the better off we'll all be.
What a great transition into my next plug. Small Town Times, one of the Echo Community Podcast Network members, publishes Back in the Bay magazine. The fall edition, we had a feature story on Neddy Amarato and his immigration story in benefit to North Bay. In the winter edition, we have Ed Ing and his family's story, and when they came to North Bay with the Chicago Cafe restaurant and the success of him. He would have been 77 this December 12th, right?
Wow.
So he was a first generation immigrant. So it goes around in a circle, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. We bought our first Hyundai from Neddy. We've bought a lot since then from his son, Lucio.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the photos of Ed in the magazine was a photo I took assigned by you when you were public affairs guy at Canadore, and I was working there, and we wrote it for the Morning Express, I think it was. That newspaper. Well, that was one of my first features with Ed Ing, with anybody, and his photo that I took in 1988 is in the magazine. So it was really cool.
Ed was a fantastic photographer.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, he was good.
And I have to say that I arrived here in 1991, and I always looked at Ed like this incredible artist, right? But it took me years to sort of understand, like, as a family, they were restaurateurs, right? And it actually took me a long time before I actually went to Old Chicago. It was unbelievable food. It was so good, right? Helen really Helen ran that, and it was like just incredible. So it's like I only saw him one way, but like his journey here was that family was restaurateurs, and they grew their footprint, and so it had a real impact.
Yeah, the municipal website for North Bay has got, I think, about 6 or 7 interviews on the website with immigrants. I was the off-camera interviewer for all of them, and Helen Ing was one of them. So, so there is a piece up on the North Bay city website.
I had an interview with her as well, and it went really well. With Lori Laporte.
Yeah.
Anyways, we can talk all day. Thank you very much, Don, for taking time.
Yay. Appreciate it, guys.
Well, that was a fascinating little discussion with Don Curry. I love talking to my old journalism teacher.
Yeah. Did you work for Don at one time, or he was just a teacher for you?
When I arrived in North Bay in '86, I hitchhiked up here. The first person I talked to was Don Curry. I went straight to his office, put my duffel bag, it was an old hockey bag, down, and I said, okay, so where do I stay tonight? It was in the spring, and he said, I have no clue. But if you go over to the Sugar Shack, you might be able to buy someone a beer and to get a floor.
What's the Sugar Shack?
It used to be the party place for college students, university students up there. It burned down.
Mm-hmm. So wait a second. Are you saying when you got here, there wasn't housing for you either?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
But you figured it out.
Well, I actually, the college gave me a list. I went down to welfare. They said, go talk to old Mrs. Reese on Tackberry. She'll give you a room for now. And then you bring back the receipt, and then we'll register you up and give
So
you
the
some.
irony is Canadore College even helped you back then.
And then I helped them.
And you're so mean to George Burton, too. Unbelievable. You ungrateful.
Well, actually, George and I arm wrestled once at a student event for a part of a fundraiser.
He would have crushed you. He's actually a pretty strong dude.
He did not.
Stop it.
He did not.
You're tiny. He's huge.
In fact, he kept slipping out because he was slipping out. He didn't want to get beat by me.
Stop it. I want a rematch.
Okay.
Can we do a rematch?
Sure.
Would you go toe-to-toe?
Yeah, I've lost about 30 pounds. I think he gained it.
Here
But
the excuses are starting before you even started wrestling.
yeah.
Okay.
So what do we have for next week?
Excited. Liza Vandermeer's joining us. She lives actually right across the street here, which is really interesting. But she's going to talk a little bit about what's happening in Trout Lake, the development of Trout Lake, and the water quality of Trout Lake. Really fascinating interview. I was like glued to everything she was saying. It was really interesting stuff.
Well, she had a lot of insight because she worked for the province with Ministry of Environment. So she's right on the ball with that. People should listen to her for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's another North Bay Echo Essentials podcast. Thank you very much. Your hosts are
Scott Clark
and Dave Dale. Hey, sign up for the newsletter before you go. Go on the computer, NorthBayEcho.ca, and just sign up for the newsletter. It comes out Tuesdays, Thursdays. It's free, and I give a little bit of my take on things and curate news for you. Have a good day.